Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. I have a very special guest today, and I actually don't know where he is now. Andrey Kasparov, where are you now?
First of all, nice to be with you, and I'm in Norfolk, Virginia right now.
Wow, okay.
At the opposite end of the country.
Yeah, I go through these searches and I try to find interesting people to talk to, and I feel embarrassed because I did a whole research on Armenian composers and somehow missed you. And I feel bad, and I will definitely add you to my list now. But you have an Armenian background. You were born in Baku and studied in Russia in Moscow Conservatory with some renowned teachers, and now teach, and also studied in the US with some renowned teachers, and now live in the US and teach. What was the journey like in Baku, if you don't mind sharing? Especially at those times.
Journey from Baku?
Yeah, Baku to Moscow.
Well, school. School was the primary reason.
Yeah.
Because, I was getting a very good education in Baku.
Yeah.
But, of course, the goal was to get into the Moscow Conservatory.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that was to go to the centralized special music school.
Yeah.
What has it called exactly? Central Specialized Music School.
Yeah.
In Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of teachers from Moscow, from the Moscow Conservatory, taught at that school.
Yeah.
And so once you graduated from that school, was much better possibility, much greater possibility for you to enter the conservatory.
Yeah.
So I was only 15. So my parents were brave enough to send me off, thousands of kilometers away to Moscow just to get a good education.
Yeah.
And the best possible in this big country of the former Soviet Union. The best music high school was there, so I auditioned, I was accepted, and they sent me off. So I spent 3 years. So my high school was in Moscow.
Yeah.
So that was the primary reason.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents had their share of doubts about this because it's a completely different environment.
Yeah. And also it was a tough time, right? It was a tough time because when I read the dates where you graduated, it was the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, when
Almost.
I was in the school. So when did I arrive in the school? In the in the 1980 or whatever time, 81.
Yeah.
Not that. Yeah. No, there was none of it yet.
Yeah.
Things were stable.
Yeah.
It's just Moscow is many times the size of Baku.
Yeah.
It has never been friendly because the enormous distances, even though it's well infrastructured, there's the best, one of the best subway systems in the world, but it's still so huge and unfriendly. And it just was a big risk to live practically on my own.
Yeah.
But, we did it for the sake of education, and there I studied with great teachers and improved greatly in 3 years and was ready for the conservatory.
Yeah.
And trouble started in 84.
Uh-huh.
Well, still 84 was good. Towards the end of the 80s. When I was
graduating from Moscow Conservatory. Yeah.
That's when it, all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
In
all directions. In all directions. From all the different parts. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, everything just kind of...
Yeah. So especially for me it was traumatic because the family had to run from Baku.
Yeah.
Because there was slaughter going on, so they put them all on a barge and sent them to Central Asia. In which they flew to over the Caspian Sea, and then they flew over to Armenia, and returned back home. So all that property was gone and still is gone.
Yeah.
2 apartments, all is gone.
Yeah.
So all in the past, and then there was just nasty war with thousands of casualties from each side, and it's still going on.
It's still going on. Yeah.
So I could never even think of returning and visit Baku. That's out of question.
Yeah, of course.
It's extremely dangerous.
Of course.
But anyway, so the decision for me was very easy.
Yeah.
Because I had no place to stay in Moscow, because I graduated from there, and then I couldn't return to Baku because it was all gone.
Yeah.
So where else can you go? So at that time I developed some good connections with Indiana, because there was a meeting of young leaders in Sochi, in Russia.
Yeah.
And because my English was a little more advanced than others, during my conservatory years, I took an advanced course in the language, and I completed a 4-year course in 2 years.
Wow.
And I think that the speed and intensity helped to learn, and I had a very good teacher.
Yeah.
So I went to that meeting, and I just met people, and that helped me greatly to define where to move next.
Yeah.
And then there I was in Indiana in 1991, even though I arrived first to New York in 1990.
Yeah.
November 30. I'll never forget that day, because that's the date Leonard Bernstein passed away.
Wow.
So my friend in New York, met me at the Kennedy, brought to her apartment. We turned the TV on. There was a big breaking news.
Yeah.
And by September 91, I started at Indiana, which was a very different experience, because after Moscow, there was a lot less distractions going on. In Moscow, it became impossible because the gates opened.
Yeah.
And every day there was some incredible performance you had to go to, whether it be Japanese kabuki or Hamburg Opera doing the entire ring, or every day, so it was just became impossible to practice.
Yeah.
There was just no time to spend at the piano or at the desk writing. You just spent all time getting tickets and going from one performance to another, from one exhibition to another. And then, of course, came to Indiana. It's a university town. That time, Bloomington was much smaller than now.
Yeah.
The university was around 40,000 people, and the town was only about maybe 18, 20.
Wow.
So it was all about university, about studying. So you get really a lot done.
Yeah.
Just sit down and you do your work.
Yeah.
So and that went on until 97, and then the job came up at Old Armenian, and I had not finished the degree yet. So I interviewed, got the job on the condition, they hired me on the condition that I will finish the degree, and I did by 99. Because only dissertation was left, and I shuttled back and forth and finished. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, nutshell. But I want to go back. Go back because there's a very special figure in your biography that I found, Khrenikov, who you've studied with briefly, maybe. And a little bit, because he's an important figure, and he was, the secretary of the Composers Union, and he had this big post, and he was also a little bit of a controversial figure from what I understand. So maybe some stories about him from your studies. It doesn't have to be controversial, but some stories maybe of your experience studying with him, even if it was brief.
Well, I studied with him formally for 2 years. So the system was, it was him, and then he had also 2 assistants, Tatiana Chudova and Alexander Tchaikovsky. So we would go and have a lesson with them, and once a week maybe he'd also come back and he'd listen to the work in progress and give suggestions. All controversy started then. They haven't started now. They started then.
Yeah.
When, again, the policy changed in terms of glasnost, which is what the Russian word for openness.
Yeah.
So they got the access to the documents and they publicized his speeches, and again, all this, dirty laundry started. So, but to us, to students, he was very helpful. He was very helpful to me.
Yeah.
He personally.
Yeah.
You could always call him directly to his apartment. He'd listen and help.
Yeah.
If there were some problems with in the conservatory, if there were some misunderstandings, he'd use his pool to help you out.
Yeah.
And he had certain views on music. In many ways, he was a popular composer.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
He was known for his songs most of all.
Yeah. And that's why maybe he got the position that he got, maybe.
Yeah, well, that was part of it.
Yeah.
And then also that's how he tried to shape his quote-unquote serious music, to make it accessible, to make it understood by the broad public.
Yeah.
That was his philosophy. But in Moscow, there was a lot of experimentation going on. Even during the Soviet era, there was a lot of experimental composers, so he was tough on them.
Yeah.
And I can't recall any specific incidents, but there were some, unfriendly comments made towards, say, Denisov or Korndorf or other, all Gubaidulina.
Yeah.
In passing. But then we now know that it was a lot more than just comments.
Yeah.
That there were some aggressive moves made, but I just knew nothing about it. We know now. At that time, I wasn't so well familiar with those issues, and I didn't know Denisov as well, and he couldn't have told me that.
Yeah.
I knew him when we were in contact, but not well enough for him to reveal all these facts.
Yeah.
So that's the short of it. So as a teacher, the all legwork was done by Chudova and Tchaikovsky, but sometimes he could be helpful in terms of some general directions.
Yeah. And he was a busy guy. He had so many different things going on, so it's kind of tough to handle all of those.
I know. He'd show up at 8 p.m. Sometimes I had to wait till 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Him to come. So everybody was dead tired, and then would start playing it on the piano because there was no computers or anything. You had to play your score. Your own. Doesn't matter. Could be opera, could be symphony. It doesn't matter. You just had to go and play. And one thing he hated, if somebody played sluggishly and kind of would not convey the character of music, would play formally. That he just didn't like. You just had to sit at the piano and really perform your work, even if it's just an episode of it, a section. If it was just one theme, you just had to present it the way it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
Otherwise, kids just start getting picky and said, well, I don't understand what's going on. That's too abstract. And, so forth. And I remember one kid's name was Sergei, and he kind of played sleepily. And he said, well, you are a namesake of Prokofiev. Prokofiev never slept at the piano. Come on.
Yeah. Going back. So, oh, go ahead. Did you want to continue?
No, I think in the nutshell, that is the long and short of it.
I want to go back to what you said about the broad public and how Khrenikov wanted to do something for the broad public. And so was that the case in the Soviet Union too? Because when stories from my grandparents and my parents who grew up at that time said that, the halls were always filled during classical concerts, orchestra concerts. Was that the case, or was it something, was the public not engaged so much? Were the composers trying to get music more accessible for the public to come to the concerts? Was that relationship still there?
Well, first of all, I don't think, the audience was always there.
Yeah.
I went to a lot of concerts. Yeah. Some of them were sold out, but some of them weren't attended that well.
Yeah.
So I think it's just composers at that time were afraid to lose their audience, and they tried to make music more accessible to retain the public.
Yeah.
But it didn't always work. For example, I remember that the best attended classical music performances were when there was a premiere by Schnitke or a premiere by Denisov.
Yeah.
I remember when they premiered Schnitke's oratorio, Faustus. It just it was impossible to even approach the Tchaikovsky hall.
Yeah.
And he was, one of those underground composers, even though was treated a little more favorably than, say, Goodbye Dulin or Denisov. It's a big subject, and I don't think I have enough data to formalize it.
Yeah.
But it worked either way.
Yeah.
So it all depended who you were.
Yeah.
Because Schnitke was a household name, despite all his experimentations, despite his complicated relationship with the authorities. He was a well-known composer.
Yeah.
Maybe because he wrote so much for cinema, or for whatever other reason they may be. So his performances were very well attended, and there could be some other people who worked so hard to make their music accessible, and nobody would show up.
Yeah.
So it just really, it all depended who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether the public would come out and fill the hall.
Yeah. And you've lived in the States for many years now, and I grew up here, even though I was born in Yerevan, Armenia. In the West, we always hear the Soviet times composers and musicians were oppressed. You studied in the last 10 years or so of the Soviet Union. Did you feel any oppression from the conservatory to compose in a certain way or to do things in a certain way?
To be honest, yes.
Okay. Yes,
it was very, very closed-minded towards Western music.
Yeah.
It was contemporary music of the West at the time. So it was just difficult to get scores and recordings.
Yeah.
So you just quite literally had to call Denisov and ask if he had a score of Sinfonia by Berio, and if he could lend it.
Yeah.
I kid you not. I called him all the time, and sometimes he helped, and sometimes he'd say, "I'm sorry, pal, I don't have this score."
Yeah, yeah.
But each time he would go to the West, he'd come back with a bunch of scores, and we had to share new works by Stockhausen or Berio or Xenakis, whoever that may be amongst us. Yeah. So to get familiarized. So that shouldn't be this way.
Yeah.
All those scores should have been in the library and readily accessible.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if somebody tried to attempt to experiment and write in those styles, whether it be total serialism, or whether it be electronic music, whether it be musique concrète, whether it be, just name it, any trend in Western music at the time, that wasn't met very kindly by the commission.
Yeah. And you mentioned Xenakis, and you sort of have a relationship with Xenakis, because one of your teachers, O'Brien, right? Eugene O'Brien studied with Xenakis, right? So there's that lineage there.
Well, I spent a semester with Dr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I encountered Xenakis in Russia when he came to the festival in St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm.
So he came and, it was announced that the composer was in the audience, so it caused almost an uproar.
Wow.
And then everybody started looking for him, and there he was sitting, just a few seats from me to the right.
Yeah. But see, this is what I'm missing in today's world. This stuff doesn't happen in today's classical world. If a composer is in attendance from the West or the East or wherever it might be, the things that I read about that has happened 20, 30 years ago doesn't really happen in classical music nowadays, does it?
In a way, I agree. Well, because I don't know, something has happened, and those big names have died out. Stockhausen, whether you like him or not, you may like Stockhausen or not, you may like Boulez or not, you may like Xenakis or not, you may not like him.
Yeah.
But those were very big names.
Who are the big names now, though? Who are the big names now that we still don't treat them the same way, though? John Adams?
I can't put him into the same category with Xenakis. I'm sorry. Xenakis is a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't put him in the same category with Stockhausen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can't put him in the same category with Boulez.
Yeah.
No, so we've got to be honest. If we talk about, in this country, about composers with worldwide recognition who would turn heads in the audience, say somewhere in Russia or in France, there are very few. One of the last remaining is George Crumb.
Yeah.
That is the name that is respected worldwide.
Yeah.
If he were to show up in the audience somewhere in St. Petersburg or Yerevan or Paris, he would turn heads.
Yeah, true.
But I don't know any other example, to be honest. I'm thinking it's a big question. Who else amongst, say, living American composers who have this kind of worldwide recognition that would really make people in the audience turn heads and whatever.
Yeah.
And sigh in awe. So maybe it'll come back. I myself can't remember even when his name. And that's the best indication of how well known the composer is. When you don't remember when you learned their name.
Yeah.
Can you remember when you learned the name Mozart? Or I can't remember when the name Crumb.
Yeah.
And I'm not even from Moscow, so I'm from Baku. That was a big, good city, but it still was off the mainstream. It didn't have as much information as Moscow could provide. Yeah. And the same is happening in Europe.
Yeah.
So once those, elephants, they died out, I'd say I don't know anybody in Germany who had the same statue as Stockhausen did. I don't know anybody in France who would be able to fill Boulez's shoes. I don't know anybody in Italy who would fill Berio's shoes.
Yeah.
Maybe we live in that. They are. It's apparent in all this country. There is lachenmann in Germany. Yeah. There is Sciarrino in Italy, but they don't have the same kind of statue.
Yeah.
No matter how much some people would like to think that they do, they don't.
Yeah.
And maybe we are in that kind of sort of post-historic era when it's just not the thing.
Yeah. Well, this might be a good thing or a bad thing, because if you think about it, it's more of an equal world where there aren't the big superpowers composers. Yeah, but it's tough. But you could also think about it's a bad thing,
Well, look at the contemporary scene today. Careers are made on both maximal complexity and maximal simplicity.
Yeah.
We still have Brian Ferneyhough, right?
Yeah.
And yet minimalism, which is total opposite of Ferneyhough, just completely different end.
Yeah.
You know, we have Steve Reich, we have Adams, we have Glass, so they coexist. If we rewind, history a little bit, time, go a little bit back, it would not be possible in the 70s, when everybody had to write in the same style, pretty much. Yeah. And then, it started to develop through the 80s, the 90s, 2000s. It kind of decentralized, which I think, on one hand, is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Because you are given a total freedom of expression. Yeah. You don't have to write like Schoenberg. You don't have to write like Stravinsky. You don't have to write like whatever the trend of the day is. Yeah. You find your own niche. But that also results in what we've just discussed, the absence of this authority. Yeah. Big names that are recognized as trend setters.
What's happening now in Russia, you think? Is there? Do you keep in touch with the Russian composers? Do you know what's going on with
some, and it's the same thing in Russia. Yeah. It's the absolute same thing in Russia. Let's be honest. Who were the last? So after Shostakovich died. So 3 big names after him were Schnittke, Denisov, Gubaidulin. Yeah. There were many other composers, but this is the names which are recognized and worldwide. And once they died, I don't think that anybody emerged to really fill those shoes. Yeah. It's again many wonderful composers, but nobody, in my humble opinion, has risen to that kind of stature.
Yeah. Is it because they're afraid to bring something unique to the table? Because the people you mentioned, they've really stepped up and they've really kind of taken a new path, maybe in some ways. But people seem to be afraid to forge new ground.
I don't think afraid is the word. There's a lot of search going on, a lot of experimentation in Russia and everybody in Europe. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's a different period. I mean, if we look at the mid ages, right? The composers didn't even sign their compositions. Yeah. It was unimportant. Yeah. It was unimportant to stick out. Mm-hmm. You create composition, you put it out, and you die together with your skill. Or your skill dies with you. Yeah. Doesn't matter. You disappear. Only composition left. Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's signed or not. Who it's attributed to, it doesn't matter. Maybe when in some of those periods of time when this is happening, but I don't know. It's a very, very big question, and these are the facts. Yeah. And I'm not in the business of explaining those facts. So I hope some musicologist would write a book on it and gives a better explanation and a better data.
Yeah. Well, no, it's great. It's just great talking with you about all of this because you have the history, you have the background of living in all these different parts of the world.
I'm happy. You bring in big questions, and I've been thinking about these questions. That something has happened, and those composers who commanded that enormous respect and influence, they're gone, and they have not reproduced, or that they haven't left someone behind who'd be able to command the same type of respect and have this kind of influence.
Yeah. I want to jump and go to a different topic now, because you're involved in so many different things, and it's really fascinating when I was reading about you. One of them is the Bartok project you were involved with Peter Bartok and Piano Concerto No. 3 and all that history. Do you mind sharing with us that whole process and how it came about?
It's brutal. It's just brutal. Because I graduated the Moscow Concerto with Piano Concerto No. 3.
Okay.
So that was one of the pieces I played. And then I came to Bloomington, Indiana, became friends with, well, actually, not in Bloomington. Remember when I mentioned that meeting of young leaders
yeah.
in Sochi?
Yeah.
There I met conductor David Bowden,
okay,
who was, and still is, the music director of the Columbus, Indiana Philharmonic.
Okay.
And he also happened to love this concerto and asked me if I'd be willing to play it. I said, yes, certainly. And then I get a call from him and saying, well, I got a call from Peter Bartok, who said that...
Who is Bartok's son? For those who don't know.
Yeah, his youngest son, from his second wife. And got a call from Peter Bartok, who said that a new audition based on recently accessed manuscript become available. Would you be interested? I said, are you crazy? Of course I'm interested. And then Peter came to that premiere, and we sat down at the restaurant, and I was amongst the first to hear all these stories before he wrote his book, My Father.
Yeah.
And that how much legal trouble was involved after Bartok's death.
Yeah, for about 15, 20 years, right?
More.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
So it was not until 1988 that Peter was able to access the manuscripts.
Wow.
Well, let's count. Bartok died in 45, right? So we're talking 40 plus years.
Yeah.
It was under legal scrutiny.
Wow.
So he told me that before Bartok died, he told him that there's so many mistakes in my manuscripts, and that I've never been able to correct it. So I hope you will be able to do so. But after he died, his wife Dita, Pastor Bartok, said that I'm interested in putting those manuscripts on sale.
Yeah.
And then they started, a son and a mother, and the son and the mother, they started legal dispute.
Yeah.
Who had the rights to those manuscripts?
Oh man.
Because
that's crazy.
It wasn't really clear in the will who did.
Yeah.
And that went for decades until her death, I believe, in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, her trustee kept the matter in the court and would refuse to surrender the manuscripts to Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only after 88, after the death of that trustee, that Peter was able to access those manuscripts and start a gigantic editing job, especially for works that were composed in the 30s, and especially after Bartok immigrated to the United States.
Yeah.
And then he told me just in amazing stories. For example, when Gusevitsky commissioned the concerto for orchestra, Bartok was in the hospital with leukemia.
Yeah.
And Kusevitsky walked in, and I said, we would like to commission you virtuosic work for the orchestra, and we can offer you $1,000. Which at that time was a decent amount of money. We're talking the 40s.
Yeah.
And you know what Bartok said in response? I mean, he struggled. He applied in Eastman and was denied. No university would hire him.
Yeah.
At all, in any capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was a great musicologist. He was ethnomusicologist. He spoke 6 languages.
Yeah.
And still he couldn't get a job. And Bartok responded, I probably die before I complete it. Pay me $500. And back to the 80s, when that trustee died. So Peter was able to get access to the archives. But the manuscript of the viola concerto was still missing, even in the archives. Guess where they found it? Amongst trustees' belongings.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, yeah. And Peter told me that he was about to give up, because of just decades of legal wrangling, back and forth.
Yeah.
And then finally in '88 he started that process. And what would have happened, and by the way, I wrote a very detailed article about it in Hungarian Music Quarterly with all these details. And that was actually proofread by Peter.
Wow.
And approved by Peter. I have his handwriting in my archive. So all those controversial stories were read by Peter, approved by Peter before I published it.
Wow, okay.
And so he started working on it. And what would happen, for example, at that time, Bartok would write a manuscript page and then would photograph it. And then oftentimes corrections were on the margins. Mm-hmm. But due to the limitations of the equipment, those margins were not photographed.
Oh, wow.
So there were some wrong notes, and was just a revelational experience for me to work on it. And I found a lot of facts from him. For example, there is a completely different version of his famous violin sonata, written on all those quarter tones, but Minuchin thought that was too off the wall, so Bartok wrote a little more accessible version of it.
Wow.
And it just went on and on and on and on. He talked about all this fact. It just was just a stunning few days. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't just. I was trying to digest all the squall of information which you couldn't find anywhere.
Yeah.
And just the only source was Peter, and he was sitting right across from me from the table.
Yeah.
And across from me at the table, and just kept throwing one fact after another.
Wow.
And now all these archives are in Switzerland.
Okay.
And together with Stravinsky and all this. I don't. There's a famous foundation. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Exactly its name, that purchased those archives from both from the Stravinsky family, and then also the Bartok archive after Peter had been done with editing, so it was purchased by them. And another interesting story, he told me that Bartok wrote a lot of letters in different languages, and one particular letter Peter was very interested in, but the owner of the letter would not sell it to him, and would not even sell a copy to him. And he authorized his agent to bid the highest price at the auction. And then he paused for a second and said, I cannot tell you how much I paid for it. and it was just a regular letter. I'm here and there, I've done this and that.
Oh, wow.
Travel to this and that. That's all that was it. But he just needed it to identify what was happening in that particular period, and just had no other choice but to pay an obscene amount of money to obtain it.
Yeah. And, you mentioned something about Bartok, that he applied to all these places and didn't get jobs and was rejected. It's crazy. It happens in today's world too, doesn't it?
Well,
Talented people who don't get certain jobs. Not on Bartok's level. Not many people could compare to Bartok, but I'm saying there are talented people who don't have jobs,
Yeah, well, that always happens. That always happens. Just read box letters.
Yeah.
Just read box letters. It's always, get my kid this job, get my other kid that job.
Yeah.
Writing to this clergy, writing to that city official, taking care of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, taking care of Johann Christian Bach. This always was going on.
Yeah.
So, they were all very, very extremely talented people, but who knows what would have happened to their careers had, the father, had he not done as much for them in terms of promoting, introducing. And then if we read letters of Mozart to his father, also his father's connections were used extensively to introduce Mozart to potential parties to commission him works.
Yeah.
And we're talking on that level.
Yeah.
We're talking that level. That is absolutely top tier.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised anymore. It's life.
Yeah.
It's life. It just, I felt sorry for Bartok because he was quite literally dying, the disease, and he was not very well known in the United States either as a composer or a pianist.
Yeah.
And in one of his letters he writes, always been able to make a living. Almost all my life.
Yeah.
Until today. So, he was faced with that wall. And ironically, he died in 1945. In 1946, the concerto for orchestra became the most performed symphonic piece.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
And who made killing on that? Boozing Hawks.
Wow.
That's right. Because he died, they came in and for very little money bought all rights for works composed in the United States.
Wow.
All rights, he sold them for pennies.
Oh man.
Just to get by. And they were the main beneficiaries.
Yeah. We could go on forever talking about, and there's so many things that I still want.
Pardon me?
I was going to say there's so many things that I want to ask you, and there's so many things that are on my list that I want to talk to you about. We could go on forever, but we're already close to an hour talking. But I want to know, as accomplished as you are, done all these different things, what advice would you give to young musicians out there who are making their career or trying to?
Just two things: be yourself and work hard. That's all I could tell.
It's amazing because I've talked to about 30 people at this point, and the most interesting thing about all of this is maybe 90% of the people have said the same two things that you've said.
Yeah, it's a simple formula.
Yeah.
Because we've just talked about all this diversity in the contemporary music world. So you can't try to imitate everybody.
Yeah.
You have to have your own voice. If you don't have it, do something else. There's just so many things to do.
Yeah.
But if you feel that you have the voice, well, good for you, develop it. And developing it is impossible without a huge commitment of time. A lot of youngsters don't understand that, electronic keyboard can only take you so far.
Yeah.
They're all real keyboard, and there's a fingerboard.
Yeah.
And an air column.
Yeah.
And a wind instrument that you have to work very, very hard to distinguish yourself amongst so many good players out there. It's just an incredible time, after all this run in the music education in the last several decades. All this work that conservatories and universities have done. There's just a lot of people out there. So those two things, I'd say I'll stand by.
And last question before I let you go, and it's one of my favorite questions. What does Andrey Kasparov do outside of music? Any hobbies? Any fun activities?
Uh-oh. No, real fun question. Well, a lot of activities lately. Yeah. Well, of course reading, but that's standard. You always have to read, listen to music and travel. Yeah. And the last 3 years also combat sports. So
wow.
That's been my hobby.
So you're actually working out, training combat sports, or watching?
No, I'm training.
Wow, you're intense. Wow, this is something we should talk about, because I watch and I love combat sports, but I don't practice it. So I hope to practice it, but I am a big fan and I watch it a lot. But
well, come over. I could teach you a few things. I do spar. Yeah, I even spar.
Wow.
So I'm active. I mean, I think it's a little bit too late to participate in competitions, even though my coach is pushing me that way. Yeah. But at 51,
you could do it. You could do it.
What's that? It's not that I don't have the cardio strength. It's just strange fighting someone who is 30 years younger than you. Yeah. It's just strange.
Yeah.
So I'm having a hard time getting on. But it was hugely beneficial for me. I lost 50 pounds.
Wow.
This is some of the most cardio-consuming things you could ever imagine.
Wow.
Because, say, I'm into Muay Thai.
Oh, wow.
Or boxing. Doesn't matter. You always work at the pace that your opponent imposes on you.
Yeah.
And that's completely different than jogging.
Yeah.
You can select your own pace.
That's right.
You don't have that choice in the ring.
That's right.
And that burns an enormous amount of energy. And I started boxing in my teens and participated in competitions quite successfully. But at that time, in the former Soviet Union, it was very limited. For example, Muay Thai was illegal.
Yeah.
And believe me or not, Muay Thai for me is a lot safer than boxing.
Really?
Yes. Well, because in Muay Thai, you use elbows, knees, legs, feet, shins, in boxing, it's just relentless fingers.
Yeah.
It's just only hands.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do the damage to your fingers in the traditional boxing.
Yeah, true.
Since you're very limited to your hands.
Yeah.
And if something happens to your finger, well, tough. By the end of the round, there may be some irreparable damage to it.
Exactly.
Well, in Muay Thai, you would change your tactics, maybe use more leg strikes or, use more elbows, or you can even grapple.
Yeah.
So that's also legal in there. So, and I had to quit boxing for this reason, because, I just felt that, it's just it's not if, it's just when.
Yeah.
There will be some terrible damage to my fingers.
Yeah.
Because once you pass, I'd say, 160, 165 pounds, gloves offer only so much protection.
Yeah.
The punches are just too heavy.
Yeah, that's right.
And especially in say, if you work on a bag moves. What if during sparring you hit someone's hip or even forehead, things that don't move, and then there's a huge force, that meets your fist, and that can easily cause, very, very serious damage. Wow. So I just had to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, I came to the gym and started working out, and I saw a fellow who was holding boxing pads, and I thought, well, maybe I'll restore some of my best ability. And he turned out to be a very advanced MMA fighter, winner of the belts in the local fighting league, and a very, very, very competent and a good teacher. So we started with boxing, and one day he said, try a kick. So my leg flew, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to have you back because there's so many things I want to talk to you still about. And we forgot to mention your wife, who's also an accomplished musician, and you have a duet with her. And so we'll maybe have you and her back at some point and talk about all this stuff. Thank you so much for joining me. Absolute honor.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and good luck, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Good luck to you. And,
thank you.
Yes, hope to see you soon too.